Welcome to another episode of the Spoon Mob Podcast. This week I'm joined by sommelier Taylor Wolfe, who is the head sommelier over at the Refectory in Columbus, Ohio here. If you've never been there, you'll find Taylor out on the floor. If you're a regular, then I'm sure you've had numerous conversations with him. Chris Dillman is also back over at the Refectory too, so it's pretty awesome to see kind of two sommeliers over there. Taylor, he's somebody I wanted to have on the podcast just to kind of learn about him through the grapevine, so to speak. No pun intended there. Just wanted to talk wine with him. And it's always cool to see somebody start out their career in a different direction than they originally planned, which so many people that have come on this podcast do. And now he's in the world of wine and gaining all this knowledge. And he's passed the intro exam, but he's gained so much more knowledge past anything that you would ever find in an exam. And it's kind of another case in point where doing all the exams for wine, there is some benefits and it can be beneficial, but it doesn't mean that you can't be knowledgeable just because you haven't taken the advanced or the master or WSET 4 or anything like that too. So we talk about his career, how he kind of got into wine, how he wound up in Columbus, where everything was headed before getting into wine, and how he got the job at the Refectory when Chris was leaving to go over to FLX Hospitality out in Geneva, and just kind of wine in general. So it's a really cool conversation. If you've never been to the Refectory or haven't been there in a while, you'll find Taylor out on the floor doing pairings and has access to all this cool stuff. So he's got a whole bunch of different stuff for people to try, that stuff they haven't experienced before, which is really awesome to see. They also have the wine shop up front, so you can stop in and grab a bottle. You can follow him on Instagram at t.o.wolf, LWOLF, also at Refectory Wine and at Refectory Dining. You can follow us on Instagram too as well, at Spoon Mob. Follow us on Twitter and Facebook. We do have a TikTok account too. We don't really do much with that. We actually did something for the first time. So you can follow us there too. It's probably mostly going to be podcast announcements though. Check out the website, spoonmob.com. Make sure to follow or subscribe to the podcast wherever you get your podcasts from. New episodes come out on Thursdays. We're doing some kind of mini update episodes with some of the guests that have been on before. Those are coming out on Monday and Tuesdays right now. And then also we'll have some additional things probably in the future, but make sure to subscribe or follow whatever platform. The YouTube episodes, those come out a week behind, so it'll hit all the platforms first, and then a week later you can get it through YouTube. Without further delay, here's my conversation with sommelier Taylor Wolfe of the Refectory in Columbus, Ohio. Cool. Thanks again for coming on the podcast, being flexible. I love talking to sommeliers. You're over at the Refectory now, which is, one of our, probably I'd say 2 fine dining restaurants, I guess, in Columbus. I mean, there's some other stuff that fits into the elevated category, but I think when people think fine dining, it's really Veritas and the Refectory. Before it was M, but that's closed and gone now. But I want to kind of get to how you wound up there and everything. But I mean, we'll start at the beginning of your career, like I do with everyone. How did you first kind of get started in restaurants and wine? I mean, originally, I think you're from Sandusky, Ohio, right?
Yeah. So I was born and raised in Ohio. I always thought I was going to move out of state to go to college, but went and found OSU and did a tour of the campus, and the campus kind of got me. So yeah, I moved to Columbus. College is expensive, so pretty much had to work some jobs on the side, and I actually ended up liking working more than studying. So worked usually 1 to 2 jobs during college, and ended up eventually in hospitality. Wanted, working from like the Fawcett Event Center to Brookside Country Club, and then eventually started getting into restaurants. And then that was kind of like a slippery slope. I think especially when I figured out when I really wanted wine was I was looking for a new career venture because I was always wanting to be a marina manager. That's what my dad was. I wanted to go and like run a super yacht facility in like West Palm Beach or something super awesome like that. But then I started dating my wife, and she was like, we're not moving to Florida. We're not going anywhere down there. I was like, okay. So kind of have to maybe figure something else out. My first like pretty good job was working at Mitchell Steakhouse up in Polaris. And like those are some pretty good check numbers and the tips are great. I was making like 20, 150 a day. That was awesome. I'd say kind of really when the wine bug hit me and like I knew this was gonna be the career is like we did Saturday. I had a gentleman ordered 2001 Mouton Rothschild. And I had to ask him like 4 times what bottle he wanted because I couldn't understand French. I didn't even know that was a bottle we had on our list. And I like went and put in the computer and it was like $700. I was like freaking out. And so opening it up on a Saturday, broke the cork, had the manager come over. He had to filter it. But then the guy let me have it and like blew me away. I never had anything in my life that was like that. And I took the bottle home that night and like took a picture of it on the Vino and was like, oh my God, this is so cool. This is such a high rating. And just like really started to get into wine. I was like, okay, this could maybe be the next venture for me. And, I was at this point was like towards the end of my college career. I was going to have to be in college a little longer than I wanted to. And that was just like, all my friends are graduating and all my friends were, getting these cool jobs. And I was still just like serving. I was just like, I kind of feel bad. So I was like, you know what, maybe I'll just take it upon myself and get my, go through the Court of Master Sommeliers and do a couple levels there and get a certification. So I'm just not a server. I'm a dignified server or something like that. I can wear my little lapel pin. And so that's when I did the certified on my own. And that was really kind of the start of it. And just got lucky with some jobs. And I think biggest jump was when I got a position at Hyde Park Steakhouse downtown. And that was awesome. That definitely helped pay off some of the college bills and allowed me to taste some big Cabernets, which is really fun.
So when you're going to Ohio State, like you said, you kind of thought you're potentially going to be like a marina manager or something to do with boats, yachts, whatnot. You got a degree in agribusiness, right? What is agribusiness? Is that aspects of farming?
Yes. And it was pretty much for anyone that couldn't get into Fisher because their GPA wasn't good enough. It was like, oh, wait, you can go take a business program in our agriculture school. And I was like, oh, okay, wait, that's great. I don't have to hit like a minimum of 3.0, 3.5. And that was just kind of the route that I took. I was always interested in sustainability and some other things like that. But just, studying in college really weren't my forte for me.
When you wind up at Mitchell's, is that just because of close proximity to campus and where you're living, or did you purposely want to work there? Or
Oh gosh, no. It was interesting how I got into Mitchell's. I somehow got a job at Mitchell's Fish Market up in Crossroads, which it's no longer there. It was like where 315 and 270 are.
Yeah, there used to be like a Hyde Park up there, and that's gone.
I think that whole area, like just completely, just hotels and apartments got put up there. That was actually my first ever restaurant job, was working at the Mitchell's Fish Market up there. And even though it's Mitchell's, it was all owned by Landry's. It was no longer affiliated with Cameron Mitchell's. And that was fun when you had people coming with $300 of Cameron Mitchell gift cards and they expected to pay a whole meal of that. And we're like, well, no, we just have the name. We're actually not done. That was always so fun to deal with. But I went to work on January 1st and I got there at like 3 and the building looked definitely different. There were like the signs were down. I was just like, whoa, what's going on here? And I go to the door and there's just like on the other side of like the dim door, there's like a piece of paper that's like put up there. It's just like, oh, we are actually closed this location due to leasing issues. So it's just like, oh, so I don't have a job. Great. And they're like, you just call our office and we can see where we can put you. And so I think I was one of the first people to find out. And I real quick drove over to Mitchell Steakhouse, which was in Polaris, because like I was like, I know this is part of the company. And I was one of the 2 employees that steakhouse was able to get. So it was kind of lucky that I got into there. And then I was only there for about 7 months until I was finally able to move to Hyde Park, which was great because that was much closer because Polaris was a far drive.
So with moving over to Hyde Park, I mean, they still are kind of one of our premier steakhouses. They had maybe 1 or 2 more locations, like I mentioned, and that close, but I think they still have 4 or 5 scattered around Columbus, I think. With kind of that switch, was that purposeful? Like you wanted to work over at Hyde Park, or was that just kind of another, like, I got to find something closer that's not Polaris? Like, where can I go?
I was at the time, man, I just wanted money. And I saw that steaks at Mitchell's, I was like, wow, people are buying wine, they're buying steaks. Like these are high check averages. And then I looked at Hyde Park downtown. I was like, whoa, like these wines are ridiculous. Like they have like $140 steak on here on this menu. That was the biggest driving factor because there was no Jeff Ruby's. There was no Ruth Chris at that time. I think Jeff Ruby's opened up like 2 years after I started at Hyde Park. But it was pretty much, I just wanted a really cool place to work and just lucky enough they called me back. And their wine program was pretty good. I mean, their wine list is pretty substantial. Now I'm not the biggest fan of it because it's like all Napa Cab, it's all Napa Chard and all that stuff, which is great. That's the American Steakhouse wine list for you. And so that was just a new fun opportunity for me and to really kind of get the final edge of my college bills paid off for, which was great.
Is the wine list so cab heavy at those restaurants just because of their buying power or just in general, probably their clientele, like that's what they want kind of thing?
100%. I think, it was easiest to continue those products, stuff that comes, just from California than versus France or Spain. The beverage director, Brandon Ford, who's a great guy who's, it's a corporate director. So, they don't really do any buying in the restaurant themselves. It's much easier to maintain just that type of list. I think when I was there, I could probably say we only sold, maybe a couple dozen French wines. Like there was like 4 Burgundies on there, maybe 5, 6 Bordeaux's, and yeah, your champagnes and stuff, but nobody ventured there at all. They didn't want the obscure, wines of Jura, or there was no Rieslings other than our little Saint M, for like $32 or $40 a bottle that we would sell. So it's just pretty standardized to keep it easy amongst the whole corporate structure, from what I would say.
You're at Hyde Park, 2018. You wind up taking the intro sommelier exam. Is that right?
Mm-hmm. I think that's right around that time. I know this is the last year that I can take the certified because technically I'm not a som. I'm a rebellious guy that's calling myself a sommelier, but
I would disagree with that. If you pass the intro, you're a sommelier, because there's somebody I had on this podcast and all they ever passed was the intro. There was no certified when they're going through. So it was like intro, advanced, and then master. And they only ever passed the intro, but they also won a grand award for their wine cellar. So like they're a sommelier.
Yeah, no, that's like what I'll say. I'll tell anyone. It's just like, okay, come at me now when you see the wine program I'm running and the wines that we do is like, and say I'm not a som. Like, I really don't care about the credentials anymore because like, it was just for me to prove to myself, my friends, my family that, I'm not just doing this, to skate by. Like this is kind of a passion and I want to be good at it.
From my understanding, the certifications and stuff now depends on what you want to do. And it seems like a lot of people kind of wind up doing the first 2 levels if they're with the court. Maybe they do the advanced, but like if you're not going to work in restaurants full time, like the advanced and the master almost don't make sense for a lot of those people. It seems like if they wind up doing like their own retail thing. But yeah, if you pass the intro, you're still a som.
I agree. Like once I take the certified, like I'm pretty much done. I feel like at least when I'm still working in a restaurant, when I do a retail shop and like I have my evenings free, can hang out with my family and my wife, then I might, be willing to go head further in the court just when I have more time. Cause like already my time's so little at home, just working all these nights all the time. So maybe in the future, but I just want to get the certified and then I'm done with it for a while.
I think too, like a lot of people have said kind of the knowledge that you can gain through partnerships or doing group tastings and stuff like that. Like the people that you meet, the knowledge that you can get from those people is more beneficial than any test that you're going to take.
100%. Like I remember when I was really starting to gear for the certified and then like I stopped, I think just because like I was working 2 jobs at the time. I had my day job as well. I went to a couple meetings of, I think it was Kendi Warden's and Amanda Moss's wine group. And it was like at Martini. And I lived on the same block as Martini. And so I went there and like, I remember like, the first time I went to that, the tasting group was awesome. Like I was so overwhelmed because like everyone knew so much more at me at the time. And I was just like, geez, this is like some star power in it. Cause like Gregory Stokes was there, Tyler Bruner, Kendi, Amanda. And it's just like, now all the people that were there are like, I feel like the head figures of our wine industry right now in Columbus. And so it's definitely those like tasting groups that like, those kind of form that network and that connection in the community of wine in the area.
So when you decided to take the intro, did you do any research beforehand? Did you know kind of what you were getting into, or was it just like, I'm going to sign up, see what happens?
I feel like I did research after I bought it. I was like super overwhelmed. Like I know a lot of people say they didn't study. I studied a lot, at least for like 2 weeks right before it, because I'm a huge procrastinator. So it was just like, yeah, I signed up like 4 months ago and it's just like 2 weeks before. Oh, crap. Okay, I need to start going. Because like the thing that the court makes clear is they're not going to make it clear what you're going to get tested on. I feel like there's just such a huge overwhelming world of wine and there's just so many different aspects to it. It's so hard to be limiting. I'm used to the classes where you get, your syllabus. This is it, everything on here. Instead of like, potentially some of this stuff is going to make it on here and a little bit of this and that. I was trying to be over prepared. It's that Boy Scout in me, always be prepared.
When you wind up taking the exam, what part was like the most difficult or challenging?
Not in the exam. No, for me, it was just like networking and just being around all these other, what I was thinking at the time were like extremely elevated professionals in the wine industry. Cause I went down to Miami. So everyone's in these, like, for me, it looked like Gucci suits and just like everyone was like, wow. And I was just overwhelmed by everybody and like people that were 3 times my age. And it was just overwhelming in that fact. The test itself was, honestly, really easy. I'm upset that I studied so much for it.
And it's like 70 questions, right? 70, 75, something like that.
Yeah, I think so. It's been a while, but yeah, it was multiple choice. And like, it was a pretty easy multiple choice. Like it was pretty obvious what some of the answers were. Like there were some of the specific laws where it's like, if it's a Napa, or it comes from California and it says, Cabernet, is it 85, 80, 75, or 90%? That has to be Cabernet. So like those are the ones that would like trick you up the most, but everything else is relatively quite easy and straightforward.
So like you mentioned, you plan on taking the certified, and based on the group that you're in now and study groups and everything, do you think you'll have to do more studying than you did for the intro? Do you think it'll be, a little bit harder, or based on what you've kind of learned?
I think that should be quite, once again, I hate using the word easy, but like, I think it'll be straightforward more. Cause like now I have such great foundation of everything. Now it's going to be more into the specifics of, just the wine regions and wine laws, and then just blind tasting. I'm definitely not worried about service. Working at the Refectory, the theory, I think will come, just put down a couple books, and but the blind tasting will be the one, because especially now with global warming, wines are changing left and right. One of my reps that I really like talking to, and he comes in a lot, and he's going to be taking the certified, I think, in November. And I was doing like kind of a little blind tasting when him and his wife came in for dinner the other day. And we just started talking about like Sancerre wines, and like now how they're just like the profile of the wines have changed so much. And now you get like all this grapefruit and more citrus coming out of them because it's hotter than it ever was. And so it's just like the total wines are just changing everywhere. So it is making it much more difficult, I feel like, with that aspect of the blind tasting. But I think the court probably, at least for the certified, gives you a lot of leeway on that. You just kind of have to prove yourself, like that math question. Your math teacher never wanted the answer. They wanted to see how you got to the answer. So if you come up with enough of that foundation and, 2 + 2, hope that they would give it to you.
Why did you decide to start the examination process with the court versus Society of Wine or WSET?
All those other ones actually just seemed a little more confusing for me, because like I wasn't working in retail. I was working strictly in-house dining. I always kind of wanted to work in a restaurant. Actually, right before COVID, my wife and I, we did a whole 1-week trip where we went to New York. And we walked like all of the boroughs. We were going to move to New York right before COVID happened. And like we wanted to work in Manhattan. Her company was going to let her start up a small office there and like, continue her job. And I wanted to work at like a Michelin star restaurant, or, work at be an importer, something crazy like that. And, just get that overwhelming experience for working maybe like a master som. And so the court always just kind of appealed to me more in all of those aspects at that time. Yeah.
Based on kind of where you're at now, do you think you'll revisit either of those organizations for what you plan on doing in the future? Or is that just something like it's certified and then after that, I'll figure it out if I want to keep going or whatever?
Probably not, unless it's something that I start seeing to be a huge requirement for maybe jobs in the future. If I maybe want to be like a corporate beverage director or something like that, which not necessarily eyeing up if that's a requirement. sure, I'll go through those things. But for me right now, it just seems tedious. I have all the wine and the knowledge at my fingertips now. I just need to be able to use it.
Month or two after you pass the intro song, you wind up kind of starting at the Columbus Club, right? So you're kind of doing two jobs basically at the same time, picking up shifts there. How did that opportunity come about? What made you want to work there?
God bless the Columbus Club. That was my saving grace. I think it was just like an ad on Indeed. They were just looking for like lunch servers. We lived in the Battleship building, which was downtown, just like across from the North Market. It's like this ironclad building. We got like the best apartment deal you've ever seen in your life. Like we got a 2-floor studio for like $1,000 with 3 parking spots, and it was awesome. And so I got this job to work just lunch shifts at the Columbus Club, and like they paid really good. It was hourly wages, so it was no tips. So it was just like flat fee, which is great for lunch shifts. And it was always 4.5 hours. You get a free lunch and like a free custom lunch. Like I was eating like triple stacker BLTs, Dover sole sometimes for lunch, or like a fresh Cobb salad. Like I had the best Cobb salads I've ever had in my life there. Like 401k, health insurance, and all of this stuff. Just like it was awesome. And so it was a really good like part-time job that just like gave me pretty much paid for rent plus some. And I'd only work 4 days a week there, maybe 15, 20 hours.
They are a membership club, my understanding, right? So did they have a more elaborate wine list or cellar or anything? Or was it still kind of along the lines of your steakhouse wines that they had?
Yeah, their list was pretty simple. It was built for the members, nothing crazy on there at all. It was a good list. It was what they needed. The 2 gentlemen that ran the program, they didn't want change, and I don't think the members did either. And so it was like you would see a lot of kind of the Napa cabs were a big part, Napa shards. They had a little dinky French section. I think it was probably 120, 150 bottles on the entire thing, but it was just enough to sustain what they needed and nothing over extravagant. That's what the club was. It was just, a good second home for places for people to go and just have a dinner away from everyone else.
Eventually you become the wine manager there.
Yeah, the plan was I actually, during COVID, there was a shutdown, the quarantine, seems like a lifetime ago. And so I was one of the lucky few servers that was able to get my job back at Hyde Park right away as soon as they opened up. And so I went in for the first shift, and just being away from people for so long made you so paranoid that first night back on the floor. And I think we had like 220 people coming in our first night. And it was just terrifying for me. And like my wife has asthma, and so we just wanted to be more careful. So after that first shift, it was great having money again, the stimulus help and everything like that. But I reached out to my day job and was just like, hey, once like my unemployment is up, like, would you guys let me come full time? And so, because like I didn't want to work at a place that just was doing that covers. And like I get Hyde Park, like you need to make your money. If you're bringing all this product, then you got to have people come in and you do what you got to do. And so I think I worked one more shift at Hyde Park, and that was it. And I never went back. And then I went full time at the Columbus Club like 2 months after, because I think I had a couple more weeks of unemployment that I was just collecting and just kind of enjoying life a little bit.
When you join them full time, are you still doing the same stuff? Or as a wine manager, like what are your kind of day to day that you're doing?
So I didn't start off as a wine manager. I don't know if I could ever say I really had that term, but it was just pretty much working as a full-time server there. They needed people, they needed good people. And like, I really knew what I was doing. I mean, I was good with the members, became very familiar with a couple of them. And some of them I actually see at the Refectory. And one of them is actually like probably my best clients for retail wine now. Because like he's interested in all new types of wine and has the money for first growth Bordeaux's and things like that. And I'm just like, all right, this is great. Made a really good first impression on my boss. So I owe him a nice little thank you for that. My day-to-day job there really didn't change too much off the bat. Unfortunately, their bartender passed away when I was there, which was really sad. And it was a surprise to everyone. It was really hard because he's been there for so long. He was the pillar of that restaurant, of the club. And so eventually I just started helping out behind the bar and, working for the manager there and just giving my input. He had the final say, and it was his club. He's the guy putting in 100, 120 hours a week there. I'm not arguing with him. They had a big expanse renovation that they were doing at the time too. And so there was going to be another bar It was plans for me to help run that part of the bar, if not kind of be like a little floor som over there. They don't necessarily have the say the quantity of business for that, but it's just like the members would want that. Like it'd be a nice little luxurious thing for them to have. And so that was kind of what the plan was for me to do. And then I got the job with the Refectory, which I didn't even apply for. It was just kind of an email I got from Chris Dillman.
How does that all happen? You just get emailed out of the blue? Like, did you ever find out how he found out about you or knew what you were doing?
I've never been so shocked or just like my gut wrenching once I read that email. But I was previously, a couple of months before, I was always trying to work for Greg down at Veritas. Like, I really was looking for mentorship. And like, I know he had a retail shop. And I was like, hey, maybe I could help run with the retail. But then he had someone else in mind. And I was like, totally get that. I'm still quite new at this. And that's why I'm looking to help. And Veritas is a pretty small restaurant, super high end. They do things great, but it's quite small and intimate. And I think that's what they want. But I think he was talking to Dillman and just said that there's this guy that was looking to work for me. I know he's interested in the wine job because like Dillman, I think left really quite shockingly. I don't think anyone was ready for him to leave there. And so everyone was kind of scrambling. And so I was actually in Colorado getting my ass beat up by a mountain for my friend's bachelor party. And like I went there on like 2 hours of sleep and we climbed like a 12,000 foot peak. And I know they would get mad at me if I didn't say I didn't get all the way to the peak. I was the only one. I was too exhausted. Like I stopped before they kept going. I was just waiting for them and rolled down the whole way back to the car. But on the way back from that car, we went to our cabin. I was looking at my phone once we hit reception again, and I saw an email and I was like, Chris Dillman, that name sounds so familiar. And like, I just going through and he's like, hey, would you be interested in running this program? We do 40 wines by the glass, like, have like 800 selections. And I'm just like, if you want, just let me know. I was like, what? Like, this is crazy. Like, this is like a dream job. Cause like, I was still pretty devastated. Couldn't go to New York, but like, honestly, like if you're going to work at any restaurant and be a floor som, the Refectory is pretty much the place to do it in Central Ohio. And like, it was unreal. I was like showing everybody in the cabin. I was like, look at this. It's like, this is crazy. And starting looking at the wine list, and I was like blown away. Like, I never looked at the Refectory's wine list before. And that wine list was like the most intimidating thing I've ever seen in my life. But yeah, it was a surreal moment when I got that email, and I instantly jumped right on it and talked to Dillman, and then met with Kamal, the owner, and lucky enough, he believed in me at the time and was able to get the job.
What's the interview process like? Obviously they reach out to you, so they're interested in bringing you on. So there is this mutual interest, but is the interview process just chatting with them, or is there like some sort of tasting involved just to see, or they're just trying to quiz you on wine, or like what?
No, the people would think the Refectory is all fancy and everything in that way. No, it's not. It's just, it was probably the simplest interview I ever had, especially with Dillman. Like, we met at, I think, like a little Korean restaurant off of this in the strip mall of Bethel. And it wasn't even an interview. It was just him telling me everything about the job. Like, I think he just wanted to find somebody to help fill his shoes so he didn't feel as bad leaving. And then he connected me with Kamal, and Kamal reached out instantly because like I think he really wanted somebody to take over that because like he did not want to touch wine. Like, and now starting there, Kamal does not want to deal with anything in the wine world anymore. So it's like strictly me, which is great. And then I met with Kamal, I think 2 days after Chris. So it was like 3 days, and talked to both of them. And it was a good interview. I think Kamal was always about wholesome qualities and just, respect and trying to get better and providing an experience to guests and bettering ourselves. And that's really all I was about, which is like, I want to get better. And this program is like the best way I feel like I could do it. And he was like, this is going to be the hardest job you've ever had. And I was like, yeah, I'm up for it. Let's do it. And then I went down to Florida with my family, and he called and let me know that the job was mine. And it was awesome, like surreal.
So what is it about the Refectory that gets some of these labels? Like you mentioned, it's going to be the hardest job that you've had. Is it the clientele? Is it the level of service? Is it just the wine list and just how big it is and how much knowledge that you need to have?
It's everything. So first off, like as soon as you walk in the Refectory, you just look up in the little foyer right there, and you have all these diamond awards. You have all these grand awards of Wine Spectator, and that's quite intimidating. The thing with Refectory, it's been around for so long. You have these people that have been there so many times. Like I would argue to say they have the best regular clientele in the city. Maybe Lindy's could give us a run for their money, being so established in the German village. But I mean, the refectory, I mean, the people there are unbelievable, how amazing they are and how much they know. Chris Dillman taught all of our regulars so much that like they could put me on the spot. Any single one of them could like bring something up to me. And that's like when we host wine dinners and virtual wine tastings, it's so intimidating because like everyone knows so much. It's not just there to drink wine. They want to learn. They want the full experience and know all the nerdy details. And I think that was really kind of the thing that was just like, once I started talking to tables, it was just like, whoa, people really know their stuff here. I can't BS everyone like I could at Hyde Park. The refectory has so many different pipelines for income due to wine. We have virtual wine tastings, which is a pain to do, but it's awesome. We have in-house wine dinners. We have our retail sales, wine features, our in-house, I'm a certified like on the floor som. Like we're doing tasting menus and custom tasting menus and all of this stuff while still maintaining 700-800 bottles on the list. There's so many different facets that gave me trouble for the first couple months, to say the least.
The wine shop, do you have anything really to deal with over there? Or is that just kind of an extension of the wine program? Or
I run the entire beverage program at the Refectory now. So do the bar, the retail shop, the wine program, which can be overbearing at points. I don't deal too much with the creative side of the bar program. We have some really passionate people that are all about cocktails, and that's great because I'm not. I'm all about drinking wine. And so I kind of let them make up the things and just like, all right, well, this is kind of where we need to fit in the budget. And just like, we'll move through these products and try to drink out and kind of just the overall management. Well, I do very little on the creative side because, our alcohol program's not too big. I think, it's probably 20%, 15% in comparison to the wine program that we do there. But, it's something that everyone wants. And we want to make sure we have good cocktails and fun drinks for people to have when they come in.
with the wine list, the wine cellar, how much can you kind of play around with it? You have Chris Dillman, who was there forever, everybody and back now. So how much are you dealing with like, well, this isn't something Chris would have had on the list, or you know what I mean? That aspect of it.
I mean, I have full reign. It's really whatever I'm feeling, I get to do. So I feel like I'm living a sommelier's dream because I don't necessarily have a budget. If I buy a lot of wine, guess what? I have to sell a lot of wine. And so, I just kind of take the restaurant in the direction that I think it should. The list, it's huge in Bordeaux, Napa, late vintages, French and Champagne has been a big aspect of it. And so it's just kind of trial and error. And now I'm at to the point where just you have so many routes to sell wine that pretty much anything I can bring in, I'm easily able to move, especially with the tasting menu. That's huge for us to move products through that. Like, 1.5 weeks, I think I was able to sell an entire case of 24-year-old Lebanese wine, from Chateau Moussard. That's definitely not a thing that you can do really at any restaurant. And it's just like, it's fun to be able to do that. My biggest, I don't want to say mistake, time where I kind of test myself. I did not want to mess up our program, and I wanted to make sure that we were stocked because everyone was talking about like Champagne Armageddon, where you're going to lose all the champagne. Yeah. And it's like, are you kidding me? I can get champagne anytime. This is ridiculous. Like, all right, stop this nonsense. We can get it. And so I overbought champagne like crazy in the holidays. One of my favorite importers, distributors is Skurnik. And what they're known for is grower producer champagne. So everything that goes in there, they own the vines, they tend to it. It makes it so much more unique and so much better. And so they did this huge direct import order when I first started. And I was just like overwhelmed. Those 80-page list of all their different producers and just all the different wines that we could potentially order. And I think I put like it was like a $7,000 order in. And when that came, like, I was just like, oh my God, this is so much champagne. And we didn't sell like any of it during the holidays or New Year's Eve. And I was just like, what am I doing with all this stuff now? And then like, I was able to figure out kind of how to maneuver that and like actually start pushing that. And now like we've gone through most of it and like we still have the good stuff that I want to keep, but I've figured out kind of how to move through products when it didn't move as fast as I wanted it to.
Because you have this great buying and sourcing power, is it more of a challenge of trying to figure out like, yeah, I could bring any of this stuff in, but who realistically is going to want this? Who's somebody who would be interested in this? Like besides myself, obviously.
I feel like now that I have and know a lot of the clients that we have, it's pretty easy for me to kind of like know, like, okay, I'm going to go through this. I have one guy that will always buy older Napa cabs, or one guy that will always buy Rieslings. And so like, I can just like, I'll play around with it, maybe bring one of these wines on the tasting menu for a while, try it out. And then everything else I could probably pawn off via retail. The more people that, I've interacted with and kind of have connections to buying retail wine on a normal basis, I feel like is definitely better for us. It's just able to just move through these obscure things. It just kind of covers my ass too.
Is there anything that you did bring in that like didn't go anywhere and you're just like, shit?
I mean, the champagne was one of the big ones. I got some big bottles. Got some like 3 liters of wine. Those are sitting around, but I've slowly started to figure out how to work those. Like for Valentine's weekend, where we have like 500-600 people to come in, we're able to have fun with that. Like, I think this Valentine's weekend, we were open for Saturday, Sunday, Monday. So we had 3 days, same menu, same tasting menu. And so for the third course, we had the third course upgrade. And I was just like, all right, what is this third course upgrade going to be? And I was just like, downstairs, we had a 1991 5-liter of Chateau Montelena. And it was a very expensive bottle. And I was just like, all right, I'd like to get this off the inventory. Let's see what we can do. And it took me about 2 hours to open up the bottle. But we were able to filter into some bottles. And we went through the entire thing of the 3 days, which was awesome. And the wine was killer, by the way. I have some really weird orange wine from northern Italy that I'm still sitting on like 2 bottles of.
That was supposed to be the next thing. Like the next big thing was supposed to be orange wine, I thought.
Yeah, it's kind of there, I feel like, but like it's not, it won't overtake anything else. I think it's probably seen its height already. There's some out there that's good. It's interesting. And usually like the biggest thing is there's a lot of this, the natural wine and all these other really fun wines to drink. But the important thing is, especially at the Refectory, is even though I think the wine program is like the most special thing about it, it's not. It's the food. Chef Richard is unbelievable mastermind behind in the kitchen. And so my job is just really not to overshadow that. And I feel like some of these funky wines out there and some orange wines can really overpower dishes. And so that's always kind of a balancing thing that you have to do, is just to make sure that I don't want to ruin somebody's palate where they can't enjoy the food by just giving them such a profound wine that has a maybe unlikable quality to it that will go with a dish.
With kind of the pairings, they do a tasting menu there. How challenging is it to find something that works with classic French food? Are there any challenges with pairing, or is that fairly easy because it is, what to expect flavor wise? So you can kind of play around with a little bit more like, well, let me try this. Like this is kind of obscure, but maybe this will work.
Yeah. So now there's no problem. When I first started, the first 4 months, oh my God, I was in trouble. I was terrified. Also, when I first started, I only had 1 day of training with Chris, and it was a busy Saturday night. Everybody was pretty much there to say goodbye to him. It was one of his last weekends, and it was like horrendous. We were running around like crazy. I was not learning anything. And at the end of the shift, we're both sweating at the service side station, just trying to drink water. And it was like, well, here are the keys. Do you got any questions? It was like, nope, I'm good. And then went and got married. And then when I came back, my first day on, that was like, I did days of cleaning in the cellar and everything like that. But the first day on the floor on the Wednesday, I was expecting to be in the kitchen for a week. I was just like, I want to get, good understanding of the food, taste the sauces and seeing this pairing and everything. And then I talked to the owner. I was like, okay, so you're just going to plan to be in the kitchen. He was like, oh, no, you can be on the floor. You can just go out and get it. It was like, you sure? You don't want me to like, just, a day there? He's like, no, you got it. I was like, okay. And so my first day unexpectedly was on the floor. And so I was getting our little bar cart and everything ready. I put all of our Corvin, our sommelier selection wines on our bar cart. Because I remember Chris telling me that I was like, we only do pairings on like Friday or Saturday. And that wasn't true. We did pairings every day, but I didn't know it at the time. And so I was not prepared for any of the wines in the pairing menu because I thought I had 2 more days and I was trying to catch up on everything. So like the first day was a frantic mess. And so I was probably just mumbling at tables and just saying, this wine's great. It's red. It's from France. And you're going to get some berries and nice tannin. Right off the bat, it was really hard doing pairings because I just didn't have a basis of the dishes. Didn't have a basis of all the wines I had at my disposal. And the worst was when we get custom pairings. That was like doomsday for me. I was just like so overwhelmed. even with the abbreviations of the dishes, I'd have to go to the menu and just like figure out like everything in this dish. And it's like, oh my gosh, and just put it all together. Now I love doing custom pairings because it lets me get through some wine that I have opened and I can just go into this other routes and just have a lot of fun with it. Yeah, it's easier now, a lot harder a couple months ago.
What is a custom pairing? Is that like sommelier choice kind of deal?
Yeah. So our restaurant, you can do a full a la carte menu. You can order whatever you want. Or we have our tasting menu, which is 5 courses. And you can do a regular tasting menu, which you get pretty much everything, seafood, meat, or you can do a vegetarian. And those all have their preset pairings. And now we also have 2 levels of pairings. So we have the standard and we have the Grand Cru. I think standard is generally 70, 75, Grand Cru's 150 to 160, which is pretty substantial. Some of our servers, our menu can be overwhelming to a lot of people because there's just so many things you just haven't seen on there and just the preparations and just kind of the format. So servers will sometimes put together a full 5-course menu for people that's ordered a la carte. That's not our actual tasting menu. And then they'll want wine pairings with that. And so then the server will pretty much just write down what course, what seat they're having, if they want like a half glass or full glass. And then I kind of just create a custom pairing on that. And then I usually go talk to them beforehand too, to see if there's any wines that they don't like, if they're up to being adventurous, because I always love when they're adventurous, because then I get to have everything out of my full arsenal, and then kind of where they want to be at price point. I have people that come in and they want to spend $45 for a pairing. We can do that for you. Or I have people that come in and they're totally fine with spending $200 for a pairing. I will happily do that for you.
Every sommelier seems to have like a region or a style of wine that's their favorite, that they just kind of gravitate towards. So what is it for you? Is it France? Is it Bordeaux? Or what's kind of your region and the wines that you really like enjoy, and that's kind of what got you into being a sommelier?
I think originally it was like Napa Cabs, and those have lost a lot of luster for me. And now it's moved more towards French wines. I love and adore a lot of French wines. I mean, they're delicious. A lot of times they're a really good bargain. Like we're doing a virtual wine tasting coming up. That's going to be Bordeaux versus Napa. I think all but one of the Bordeaux wines are cheaper than Napa. And I think they're actually a little bit better too. So I think there's just so much value in there. And just most people don't know a lot of the stuff. There's a lot of obscure items out there that just don't hit the retail market spaces. I adore small production, weird wines that no one's ever heard of. And I'd say probably my biggest go-to right now is sweet wine. Because when I first started, I never worked with sweet wine. And going back to pairings, that was the hardest thing off the bat for pairing wise was desserts. Because one, the desserts were all very different in flavor profile and richness and sweetness. And then dessert wines, I just didn't know too much about them. I knew there was port. I knew there was maybe a sweet sherry. And there was, a thing called Madeira, which Chris Dillman loved and brought in an obscure selection of Madeiras. Like we have, Madeiras from the 1800s and all this fun stuff now, which I love. And we're about to restock up on some of that stuff. But that was where I kind of have fun now. And because I think that's always a great way to wow people at the very end. And my biggest go-to, and we have to be the biggest purchaser of this in the country, is Domaine de Rancy, which is this lovely little Rifsol Ambre. Rifsol is a village in the southern part of France. Ambre is a rarer form of this wine, and it hits everybody. Everyone loves it. Like I've sold so many of that bottles of these wines to go because they just are overwhelmed by a sweet wine. They've never even knew how it could taste like this. And it's usually, I describe it as like a whiskey wine. And that's how it gets everyone right there, especially the gentlemen. I say, you like whiskey? Yeah. Do you want a little whiskey wine? They're like, oh my gosh, yes. So I'd say that's kind of always been my little secret weapon ever since I've been at the Refectory.
Is there a region that you're excited to kind of explore that maybe you haven't paid too much attention to? Like when you get back into doing stuff for the certified and whatnot?
Riesling, Germany, those high acidic wines. Those are something that I'm trying to get into more. We're going to be hosting like a Konstantin Richter, who's a winemaker coming from Germany next month. And I'm super excited for that. That's a good thing about the job too, is that I have full leeway. It was after the holidays. We had, rosé champagne was the first course pairing for probably 2.5 months because it was so good. Everyone liked it. And there was like a special discount on it if you did it by the glass. And so we were making good money off of it. And I was just like, okay, it's after the holidays. Let's try something different. And then I started putting a couple different Rieslings on the tasting menu. And not because I thought everyone would love them. It was kind of, I wanted to try them. And I was like, okay, I'll buy 6 bottles of this and try this out. And then 6 bottles of this and try it out. And people love them. It's crazy. We've had a $35 glass of Riesling on our list and it sells. Like, I would never expect for people to want like a super sweet Riesling and pay top dollar for it. It's surprising to me. That's an area that I definitely want to dwell into a little bit more.
Natural wine. Are you for, against?
100% against the fad. Like, natural wine's a thing. Like, people don't understand that, like, European countries have been doing that pretty much already for decades, and they just don't market it and brand it as this new thing, this great thing. It's like they've been doing this for so long. And like, I also feel like this is probably not totally true, but like, they're just skipping steps on making wine. It's easier to do. And half the time it produces a wine that, in my opinion, that's faulted, where it just doesn't have the exact flavor profile it should. Like, I'm fine if you have to add sulfites and other products to a wine for it to taste better and have a better longevity. That's great for my means. But like, I support 100% organic, biodiversity, biodynamics in the winery, co-planting, all of that stuff. That's great. But, I'll always try something, but the Refectory doesn't really have need for any of those products. And that kind of goes back to the thing where I just don't want to ruin anyone's palate for their food. And I think some of those wines, when you have those Flintstone gummy bear vitamin flavor profile that just like grits in your mouth, like I don't want to give you that experience at the table when you're about to get your duck leg confit. Like, that's just not really, I think, the best route to go with.
Columbus is still, a beer town. Napa Cab, also very big, as you've said, getting into wine. Do you think there's been any change in the city's drinking habits, or will be? Seltzer kind of came and went. Some natural wine places. The dry mill just opened recently too. I feel like there's small little sub pockets of like, it's still a craft beer town.
Yeah. I mean, our list is pretty much all kind of craft and smaller producers for our beer. That's actually something that I want to work over this summer, is changing it up, because we haven't changed it up since our last bartender was in. I've kind of wanted to venture into that a little bit more, but it's just been such a low priority for me. Like, our beer is like 1% of the sales of like just our beverage. So it's just like, I don't move through stuff. Like, I got really excited when we brought some stuff in from Pretentious. I love sour beers. I think those are great. And their wines, like, they're aged in Chardonnay barrels. Like, awesome. That's great. And, I thought we'd move through a little quicker. And it's just like, I think I bought 2 cases of it like 2-3 months ago. And like, we still have like a case left. We just don't move through that stuff. In terms of like wine trends that I've started to see, I'm actually surprised that we don't sell more like Camus and Silver Oak, all that kind of wine, which is great. I'm totally for that. I still say it's pretty Napa centric, but the great thing about, the Refectory, it's a French restaurant, and like, people like, I feel like already coming there, they're challenging themselves to try something different. And especially with a sommelier there, they do like to ask, like, okay, we don't normally try French wine, but like, we're at a French restaurant, let's try something different. And, that's like my favorite words to hear. It's just like, yeah, perfect. We're going to be able to get you into something different. And like, I'd say Chateauneuf de Pop and Southern Rhone wines, those are huge right now. People love Southern Rhone wines. I've been having trouble like stocking some Chateauneuf de Pops because they go like crazy. I'd say that's kind of maybe a trend where people are going a little bit more, but I just think the Refectory is already people are just willing to change and try different things when they come there.
Are you able to enjoy dinner out? Like, if you go somewhere that has a wine list, or are you compulsively checking the beverage list to see what they have and price points?
Yeah, 100%. It's a disease. I feel bad when I go out with my wife. It's like, all right, 5 minutes. Give me 5 minutes. Drink your drink. I got to do my quick little look and everything like that. I am still like always intrigued to see what people are selling products for and what type of wines they have. But I've gotten better at it now that I don't do it too much. I've checked my OCD. I do like going out and seeing what other products people have and just always trying something a little bit new. But most of the times, like, especially I feel like a lot of the places in Cameron Mitchell's, like I've seen all these wines before, it's always going to be pretty much the same thing. Unfortunately for the staff of the refectory, they have to deal with me. And like, I constantly change wines by the glass because like, I can't pick. I like love everything too much. I love this week. And then I love this so much more next week. And we just got to change stuff so much. Like the tasting menu changes a lot now just because like I want people to experience all these different types of wines. I've gotten a little better on that. I promised to the staff, I was like, I'm going to try my best, but I'm breaking that promise a lot.
Since you've been involved, how has the food and restaurant industry in Columbus kind of changed, and where do you see it headed? What do you think still needs to change about it?
So I feel like naive. My eyes weren't open when I first started. I think it's moving in a lot of really good directions right now, especially with things that are happening downtown. I think a lot of people are getting excited about Intel and, seeing that huge growth spurt that's going to come. I know there is some development down, where like Veritas is, and there's going to be this whole new kind of like French sector of downtown Columbus. And, that'd be exciting to see where that goes. But, I think everything's still kind of going quite slow. But I think we have a really good wine community in the city. And I think that Columbus is, especially talking to people in like Cincinnati and Cleveland, the market is killing it right now. We're seeing a lot of good trends going in here.
What's next for you professionally? Obviously, you're at the Refectory. You have this great beverage director job. Down the road, I know you mentioned you were going to do the certified, but future kind of dreams, endeavors, anything?
Yeah, I'm torn. There's so many things I still want to do. Like one, I don't want to leave the refectory for a while, like, because I'm just having so much fun that the program is like fully mine now, like where I know, 95% of the bottles on the list and I know where they are more importantly. But just the comfort of all of that. So, I'm very happy where I am for now. Going forward, more short term, like me and my wife are still always kind of nibbling at the idea of moving to a large city. New York was a dream for us and we were crushed when that couldn't happen. And just to be able to be in those markets to sell, which is be awesome. Like we had the guy that actually took over the wine program at the Refectory, Jerry Krause. He took over, I think, after Jeff Alasky passed away, which was 6-7 years ago, something like that. And he came back in town and he kind of did what like we wanted to do. He went to, I think it was, San Francisco, worked at like a 3-star Michelin. He worked under a master som. He was selling, cases of DRC and all this like crazy wine that I'd be happy if I sold one bottle of that here for like 5 years. And so just to experience that a little bit would be great. I've always thought about Napa, but then just went out there 5 weeks ago and prices are just too crazy. So we cannot go live out there. But I'd say now more long-term, Cleveland's going to be the destination for us. My wife's family is all up in Cleveland. When we want to start a family, we'll probably really consider moving up that way. And I've always wanted to live next to the lake again, want to get a little boat and have fun. Professionally, when up there, I don't really want to leave front of house necessarily. So I don't know if distribution's my game. So maybe like a corporate beverage job to start off until I get funds. And, the end goal is 100% going to be my own little wine store. I want to have a brick and mortar wine store. Even if we can live up on top of it, that'd be great. Nothing crazy, just something that would be mine. I get to sell the wines that I want to sell. And so, I've always kind of thought about that idea, maybe trying to buy an existing wine shop up there. There's one called Rossi's that I've always like, hey, maybe by the time I'm going up there, they might want to sell or something to have a good foundation to build upon, especially going to a new market where I don't know anyone. That would be the biggest challenge.
This next question comes from Jack Moore, former chef at Watershed, Black Cap Hot Sauce. He was a previous guest on the podcast, Left Behind. Question for you. If you could choose any other career to be in, to reset, do it all over again, what would it be?
I feel like I should say finance, right? With how much money they make. I feel like I would have maybe stick with what I wanted to do in the first place, be a marina manager and working with boats. I feel like I grew up on the water and my dad was a marina manager. He was the third ever certified marina manager in the world and pretty much kind of wrote the foundations for the programs. And like, I just, always envied what his job was and to be on the water and to work with like, super yachts, like going down to like Florida and seeing these 200-foot boats is just like, wow, this is crazy. It's like me now looking at a bottle of like a Screaming Eagle. It's like, whoa, it's like, that's a gem right there or something like that. So probably do something like that.
With a marina manager, what all does that entail? So I'm assuming it's always going to be kind of private boats, a lot of big boats, yachts, stuff like that. But you're essentially running the entire like high-end marina, essentially, right?
Yeah, well, the one in Sandusky wasn't high end, but yeah, down in Florida or something like that. Yeah. So, just having all those amenities, probably having like a restaurant or, a nice bar on the property. And I'd say that was probably like my first ever hospitality job because like I was dealing with boaters and dockers. Up in Sandusky, my dad actually, he ran 3 different properties. He ran, a 600 slip marina that had a huge gas fueling dock. And then there was 2 additional yard facilities where they would do repairs and then storage, out of water storage during the off season. And that's where I first started, was working in there. I was zamboning the floors after all the boats went out of the warehouse and just going in there and just doing all the yard work and all the grunt work, which was pretty fun and satisfying. It was fun being, his kid, because like we also got free dockage and like we had the best slip, and it was always kind of cool to go after work and they're just like, I'll go hang out on the boat or something like that.
What question do you want to leave behind for the next guest?
If it was wine related, if there was any one wine region in the world that you would not ever want to see change with global warming or any change ever, I guess that doesn't work for a chef. If there's any one food item that you'd have to eat and pair with for the rest of your life, what would it be?
This question comes from one of our listeners. Where do you think the wine industry as a whole will be at the end of the decade by 2030?
I would like to say it's a point where it's cheaper than what it is now, but I know that's not going to be true. I think over these next couple of years, I think wines are reaching like a really top price point. Like they're out of control, especially over, the last 5-6 months now that Chris Dillman's been back at the Refectory. He's been telling me about like when he was back at the Burgundy room, he was like, oh my gosh, we were buying this bottle for like $12 and now I'm buying it for like 80. I think maybe in some way correcting itself. I would like to say that like Cabernet probably won't be as dominant as it is as well right now. Because it's dominant everywhere you look. In Spain, it's a lot of different places where you don't expect to see it. France, it's still good. And California, Washington. Assume that maybe you'll start seeing some other varieties really starting to come up to the spotlight. And that's where these new generations of wine drinkers are going to probably maybe not growing up drinking, just these classic wines that you see nowadays. And that I was starting my early days drinking.
Especially like Napa, and maybe it's going on in other regions, but there's definitely a consolidation effort. Like you see these big Gallo and Duckhorn just did it again. Like they're buying up like just a shit ton of vineyards when they get, or other wine labels and stuff like that. Is that going to still continue, or at some point that's kind of got to trail off, right? Like you can only have so many competing wines within your own portfolio. Like if you look at the champagne houses, what the Louis Vuitton, like they would constantly have, and you're like, they'd have like 4 or 5 different like high end, and you're just like, you're just competing against each other in a way, and then they'd sell one off or something like that. Like, will it be kind of similar to that?
I don't know, maybe. I think that's got to stop at some point. Like you can get to 100%, but then after that, you can't own anything else. It's kind of a shame to see a lot of the stuff get bought up. I would like to say that, they keep the people on, the families on that they bought it from to continue the tradition of the winery, but now it's just owned by, a huge corporation. But a lot of times I feel like that doesn't happen. And if it does, it only happens for a couple of years. And they're like, okay, wait, we need to worry about the profits a little bit more than what you're worrying about. And kind of, all right, sorry, this is your 2 or 3 years are up and we're bringing somebody else in. I think there's got to be a correction course over the next decade. Definitely seems like it's getting out of control. Even over the last couple years where I've gotten more into wine, it's just like left and right, everybody's getting bought up. And I don't want to say it makes bad wine, but it just makes a lot more of monotonous wine, which for me, that's like the worst thing ever. Like I want my wines to be different. I want to be able to get the taste and profile of all the wines.
Last set of questions here. Ask these to all the Psalms that come on the podcast. So nice compare and contrast across the episodes. Who would you say is the biggest influence on your wine career thus far?
Honestly, locally, it's Gregory Stokes and Chris Dillman. Gregory Stokes was, for me, just starting off the bat, competing against. He ran a huge program, Veritas, and it's just like my wine reps, if they knew how to work me, they would just say, "Oh, Greg just brought this in. Okay, I want it. Bring me a case of it. That's going to be it." But now it's moved away, and I definitely say Chris is a little bit more on that. He's my Wikipedia of wine. When we're just hanging out at the bar, he's doing his thing, I'm doing mine. And I'll just ask him questions, and he'll go off on these tangents and stories of things that I've never even heard. I mean, most of my wine journey has been pretty solo, which I'm happy with because I've always been kind of a lone wolf. But now that I'm getting more into the community and in-depth friendships with people, I'm starting to get that more of that influence. So I'd say right now, probably Chris's bigger influence I've had. And I don't know if that's a good or bad thing because he's definitely stuck in his ways.
What is your desert island wine?
Agliore Grand Cru Champagne. I can't get enough of that stuff. That stuff is delicious. Probably not the most crazy desert island wine, but dear Lord, it's so good. I've never heard of Agliore before I started the Refectory. I saw we had this and I was able to taste a bottle of it once before we ran out and just fell in love. I mean, champagne is my go-to, but Agliore for me is the best of the best.
Restaurant that you'd recommend that isn't your own, so it can't be the Refectory?
Probably a little bit more of a common answer, but Martini. I freaking love Martini. And just once again, we lived on the same block as there. So me and my wife went there for happy hour all the time. And their arancini, the fresh mozzarella, this stuff never changes, but it's so good. And okay, I'm sorry, how did I forget the butternut squash tortellini? This is like the best dish I've ever had in my life. It's so good. And it's really good because when me and my wife first started dating, she was a vegetarian, didn't eat seafood, didn't eat chicken. But I have corrected that path and she now eats chicken and turkey. So we are able to venture out other places, but Martini's butternut squash was always our go-to.
Bucket list travel destination, bucket list restaurant. So a place you haven't been to that you want to visit, and then a restaurant that you haven't been to but you want to eat at.
Place I want to travel to, Paris, France, Burgundy. Those are the big places I really want to travel to. Hopefully going to be doing a Europe trip next year. Place that I want to eat at, just because of all of it, was a Daniel Ballad's La Pavilion, which is in New York City. It's like a new restaurant that opened up. And I don't know if it was just all over. I think I started following Daniel Ballad on Instagram when he first opened up that restaurant. And it was like all pictures of it. And it was like, for me, it looked like the most breathtaking restaurant in the world. I imagine the food probably is going to be behind there. I'm sure there's better places, but like if I could go anywhere, I think that would probably be it.
Yeah, I think he's going to be opening like another restaurant out in like LA or something. There's no like formality on it. It's an idea and somebody said, yeah, sure. And then like it's in the works kind of thing.
And then I would say to that point, probably at the end of the decade, then you're going to start seeing Daniel Ballad's, like a drive-through in your local city or something like that. Like we go, the Columbus Airport has a Wolfgang Puck restaurant or something in it. I've never seen it open. It's always been closed every time I've gone by it.
I don't know if it's open anymore. Like every time I've been through there since COVID, it's been closed. But that entire airport is basically closed at like 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon. It's so wild. I kind of despise that airport. Like none of the terminals are connected. You can get through security fast, which is like the only cool thing, but it takes forever to get the shuttle to the parking lot. If you check a bag, it takes at least like 15 minutes before they unload. Like it's the only benefit is that like you can get through security in like 10 minutes.
All right. Well, that makes me feel better because like we always fly at obscure times. So it's super early or super late and nothing's ever open. So that makes me feel better. But it's good that they're redoing the airport. I mean, I know it's going to be like a decade or anything, but.
Craziest thing you've seen happen in a restaurant while you're working?
I've seen 2 people cry because the wine was so good. I had one gentleman who was from Hungary and his family owned a wine estate there, and they had to leave Hungary for some reasons. And once his father passed away, he wanted to purchase the property, but like it was just a ridiculous amount of money that the government wanted him to pay for it. And so he's just always has this connection, and he's never had Tokaja Sansia, which is like one of the sweetest wines in the world. It used to be like a wine for kings and queens, and we actually serve it into this little crystal spoon, and I served it to the guy. And I'm sure there were so many emotional things, and just the wine was so freaking good. He cried drinking that. I had another lady that she did custom wine pairing, and at the end, I gave her this old it was like a 1790 Solera of sherry. I think it was like Osborne VS Oloroso Sabrita, which is one of their ancient like four Soleras of the sherry. And like she was just like in love with it. She was like, I've never tasted anything like this. Like you made me cry. Like I didn't know that I could have that emotion. Making somebody cry with wine is like, wow, that's an experience right there. I've seen some crazy things, but I'd say that's the one that just always has stuck with me a little bit more.
Food or drink guilty pleasures, or anything that you know is terrible for you, fast food, candy, whatever, but just can't help.
McDonald's fries and just a plain cheeseburger. I am a simple guy. Like when I was working at Marina, like I would go wash the owner's boat, and there was a McDonald's that was like a 5-minute bike ride away. And I would go and I would get like 3 cheeseburgers, a large fry, because my parents weren't there and they couldn't see anything. And I would just eat it. And it was like, oh, this is awesome. I don't really have a guilty pleasure drink. I just like a light beer or a good Italian beer, like a Peroni and Negroni.
Wine recommendation time. So 4 categories: $20 and under, $50 and under, $100 and under, and then over 100, no limit.
Under 20. Just came across this like a couple months ago. Evolution Ferment. So it's another one from Hungary. It's a dry style of ferment, and it is so good. Beautiful ripe fruits, a sharp acidity, mouth-watering, really nice. I think it's like $14. Evolution Ferment. Under 50. There's this really good wine. We're the only place in the state that has it because it was brought just for us. Oliver Gras Prat Sura. It's coming from Vaqueras, which is in southern France in Rhone Valley. It's kind of like Chateauneuf de Pape's little brother. It's like an elevated plateau. Prat Sura is like 50% Syrah, 50% Grenache. It's awesome. Big, bold, but delicate. That's like one of the biggest crowd pleasers. I think it's like $35. That wine over delivers. Now for 100, oh, there's so many different things out there. I'd say probably like a nice Spanish Rioja, maybe a Muga Prado Aneo, which are usually like right now, I think they're on 2011 vintage, and it's like $90. And that wine is awesome. Definitely over delivers on it. I mean, sees a lot of oak, big, balsamic, appeals to a little bit of everybody. That you want a little acidity, but then you also want a big wine. And then Clos Regard for any wine over 100, which is like a mythical Cabernet Franc that comes from the Loire Valley. And so the Refectory was lucky enough. I think Chris was the first one that brought it in. So during COVID shutdown, it's pretty much a wine that exclusively stays in France to Michelin star restaurants, super small production. During shutdown, they needed other places to sell the wine. So it was one of the first times that it's hit the international market, and Columbus was able to get some. And so we have some of that. And it was actually the one day I trained with Chris, he let me have some because one of his guests bought it and left him half the bottle, and he still had it. And it was the Clos Regard Semur Champagny Le Bourg, and one of the most memorable wines I ever had. It was incredible. Like I thought I was drinking a 20-year-old wine, but it was only like 6 years old, and it was just blew me away. And I think like the actual retail price of it's probably like $300, but you can't find it on the secondary market for probably like $600-700. It's stupid how expensive it is.
Favorite Instagram account you follow?
Death & Co. Cocktails are always really cool. It's just the place, me and my wife, that I've always had a very close relationship to that. But every time we've gone to New York, we always go to Death & Co. And I have like all their books. And I don't think I've ever made a cocktail from their books, but it's just like I have it. And it just like makes me feel like I'm in New York every time I see it, a post from them. So I'd probably say them.
I'm an Anthony Bourdain fan, but not everybody is. If you were, moment, episode, scene that stands out to you about him the most. If you weren't, is there anybody who was on TV, hospitality industry, chef, or anything that you kind of gravitated towards when you're getting started in your career?
I actually started my career when I was a little kid, The Man vs. Food. I love that show, that guy. But now, not really anyone too much. I forget her name. She was one of the master somms that did my introductory exam in Miami. I can't believe I'm blanking on it, but she runs like a ton of beverage director in West Palm Beach. There's like a really nice, the Breakers. She's the beverage director of the Breakers. She's a master som. I mean, there's only like 30 master soms that are women, so probably that.
Where can people find you? Social media, website, plug everything.
I'm on social media on pretty much only Instagram. I'm on Facebook, but I just go on Facebook to scroll and see where all my friends from high school are. And if it makes me feel better or makes me feel worse. Instagram's pretty much solely it. And I think I'm t.o.wolf on Instagram. That's pretty much, I kind of had a purge of social media, I feel like, over COVID. And I was just like, okay, enough of all this. Like, this is making me sick.
And you can follow the Refectory accounts too as well. There's a couple of them. We'll post them. I don't remember them off the top of my head. It's like the Refectory Dining is the restaurant, but I'm pretty sure there's like a separate one for the bottle shop.
That'd be news to me. I didn't know that. Because there used to be an old Sylvia. She came from Anderson. She ran the retail shop. So maybe she did that a while ago. But now I think it's strictly Refectory Dining. Every once in a while, I have a takeover on that account. Anytime you see wine, that's me. And it's usually the blurry images as well.
And you guys are open, what, like Tuesday through Saturday?
Wednesday through Saturday. Open basically 5 to 9. And then we're open Mondays and Tuesdays for private events and dinner music series and wine tastings.
Well, I appreciate you coming on. I think we might see you this weekend. We had a reservation. We had to change it, but I think it's a Saturday. We'll see you then. But yeah, I appreciate you coming on. It's always fun to just talk to Psalms and like nerd out on wine and stuff. So it sounds like it's a cool place. Awesome cellar situation you got there. So stay in touch. If you ever need anything from us, let us know. We try and support everybody as much as we can. It comes on the podcast, but I think we'll see you this weekend.
Awesome. I would say, if you could ever help out, is I live in Westgate, and it's like 3 blocks down is Roy's Avenue Supper Club. And I've tried to get in over there. And so if you ever have any in there, that's where I would ever ask for help.
I'll see what I can do. They're tough. I mean, I got invited once and it's a great time. It's kind of like I think one of the nights, I think it's like Mondays when they do it, is usually like, it's just a lot of industry people or whatever. But when I talked with Andrew, because originally they did like a list through like Instagram, but then they just would get like hundreds of messages. And he was like, this is the worst idea I ever had. Like, I don't know why I did this. So now, they still have that list that they try and go through or whatever. Don't bother messaging them or anything if you're hearing this. But they work through it and everything. They're getting ready to do some more pop-up dinners, I know, too, as well. And those are pretty much same vein too as well, but it's always a new menu and everything too that they've done. He hasn't done one in a while, since like last fall. So that should be coming back because they were working on trying to find a space. But yeah, I'll put a word in for you if I can. I'll do what I can.
One of my wine reps lives like 3 blocks down, and they actually bid on our house, and we bought houses at the same time. And we were both like, isn't there a supper club that's like just like down the block in the neighborhood? And so we've both been trying to get in.
I'll see what I can do. No promises. A big thanks again to Taylor for coming on the podcast, taking some time out of his day off to come on and chat about his career and wine. Funny story, when Taylor and I recorded this a couple weeks later, we went to the Refectory, and that would actually kind of be our last dinner out because then our son was born 3 weeks early, the day after. So it wasn't planned that way, but just kind of an ironic bookend to the last month or two and kind of living in chaos. But a big thanks again to Taylor. You can follow him on Instagram at t.o.wolf. Also, you can follow the restaurant at Refectory Wine for kind of their wine shop, and then at Refectory Dining for the restaurant too as well. You can follow us on Instagram at SpoonMob, Twitter and Facebook too, SpoonMob1. Check out the website, spoonmob.com. And then also make sure to subscribe, follow the podcast wherever you get your podcast from. New episodes on Thursdays. We're releasing some other episodes during the week right now, just recapping, kind of updating for a few guests that have been on and opened different concepts or moved to different restaurants and whatnot. So that's been a lot of fun to do too as well. So more new episodes on the way on Thursdays though. Appreciate everybody listening. Continue to help spread the word. If you're new, welcome. If you've been here for a while, thank you for your continued listening